My name is Melissa, and the story I'm about to tell you is one that still feels like a scar that healed but left a mark I'll never forget. For years, I thought my sister and I were inseparable. Her name is Rachel. She was the one person I trusted with everything, my secrets, my plans, even my dreams. We grew up close, sharing a room, fighting over clothes, staying up late whispering about boys we liked and what our weddings might look like someday. I never imagined that she would be the one to break me in a way no stranger ever could. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means so much to me and helps me keep sharing these stories with you. 3 years ago, my life looked like it was falling into place perfectly. I had just gotten engaged to Daniel. He wasn't just handsome, he was kind, ambitious, thoughtful. He made me laugh when I wanted to cry, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like the world was finally safe for me to dream again. Daniel and I had been dating for 2 years before he proposed, and when he slipped that ring on my finger, I thought nothing could go wrong. Rachel was the first person I told. I rushed over to her place the morning after, my hands still shaking with excitement, my eyes sparkling, ready to scream and jump around with her like sisters do. At first, she squealed, hugged me, and said she was happy for me. But looking back now, I can remember this flicker in her eyes, like she was trying to hide something. I pushed it aside. I wanted to believe that she was just as thrilled for me as I was. Planning the wedding became my whole world. Rachel offered to help, picking dresses, tasting cakes, even giving me advice on what flowers to choose. I thought it was sweet. She was single at the time, so I figured she enjoyed living vicariously through me. What I didn't realize was that every step she took closer to helping was really a step toward Daniel. The first time I noticed something odd was when Daniel mentioned that Rachel had called him directly to ask about his groomsmen. I remember tilting my head, confused, because why would she need to talk to him about that? But Daniel just laughed it off, saying she was probably excited and wanted to feel included. I ignored the twinge in my chest. Love makes you blind, and I was no exception. But then it happened. 2 months before the wedding, Daniel sat me down, his face pale and serious, and told me he couldn't go through with it. My world collapsed in that moment. I thought maybe he was stressed or scared, but when he told me the reason, I couldn't breathe. He said he had fallen in love with Rachel. My sister. The person who knew every corner of my heart. I didn't cry at first. I didn't scream. I just sat there in silence, numb, while my entire life crumbled around me. Rachel came over the next day, trying to explain, but her words felt like knives. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that they just clicked, and she couldn't deny her feelings. She had the nerve to tell me that one day I'd understand. Understand? How could I ever understand my sister stealing the man I thought I would marry? The wedding was canceled. My engagement ended. And to add insult to injury, Rachel and Daniel got together officially. For months, I couldn't even go to family gatherings without feeling everyone's eyes on me, like I was the pathetic sister who couldn't keep her man. My parents told me to be the bigger person, that love happens in mysterious ways. I felt abandoned not just by my fiancé, not just by my sister, but by everyone who was supposed to love me. So I left. I packed up my things, cut contact, and moved across the country. It was the hardest, loneliest, and most freeing decision I ever made. I built a new life, brick by brick, through pain and anger and endless tears. I focused on myself, my career, my passions, and eventually, I met someone who reminded me what love was supposed to feel like. His name is Michael. Unlike Daniel, he didn't just love me, he respected me, cherished me, and never once made me feel small. Fast forward 3 years later. I was happy. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. Michael and I had gotten married quietly in a beautiful ceremony with just close friends. My family wasn't there, because by then, I still hadn't forgiven them for choosing silence when I needed them most. But then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my mother inviting me to a family dinner. She said it had been years, and maybe it was time to reconnect. At first, I didn't want to go. Why should I? Why should I sit across from Rachel and pretend like she hadn't shattered my world? But Michael encouraged me gently. He said sometimes facing the past is the only way to close the door on it for good. So I agreed, reluctantly. The night of the dinner, my heart was pounding in my chest as we pulled up to my parents' house. I could already imagine the whispers, the awkward silences, the fake smiles. Michael held my hand tightly, and I reminded myself that I wasn't the same broken girl I had been 3 years ago. I was stronger. When I walked in, the air grew thick. Rachel was there, of course, sitting next to Daniel. My parents lit up when they saw me, but the tension in the room was undeniable. Rachel's smile looked forced, and Daniel couldn't even meet my eyes. I sat down quietly, trying to stay calm. The small talk was unbearable, the kind where every word feels like it's tiptoeing around an invisible landmine. And then, right when I thought I couldn't take another second, the front door opened. Michael stepped in. I had gone in first while he parked the car, and none of them had met him yet. When he entered the room, tall, confident, and warm, Rachel froze. Her fork literally dropped onto her plate. Daniel stiffened, his jaw tightening. My parents looked stunned. "Melissa," my mother said slowly, her eyes darting between me and Michael, "you didn't mention." "This is my husband," I said calmly, my voice steady, almost too steady. "Michael." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael reached out, kissed my cheek, and greeted everyone politely, like nothing was unusual. But I could feel Rachel's stare burning into me, her smile cracking as reality hit her. She had stolen my fiancé 3 years ago, but here I was now, not only surviving, but thriving, with a man who outshined Daniel in every possible way. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt powerful again. Michael slid into the empty chair beside me like he belonged there, his presence filling the room in a way that made me instantly relax. His hand brushed mine under the table, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. My parents kept glancing back and forth between us, clearly caught off guard, but no one spoke for what felt like forever. Finally, my mom broke the silence with an overly bright tone. "So, Michael, what is it that you do?" Michael smiled, polite as always. "I'm a surgeon," he said calmly. "I work at the city hospital. It keeps me busy, but I love what I do." Rachel's face twitched. I caught it, just a flash of something sharp in her expression before she masked it with a smile. Daniel cleared his throat and muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear. I sat there, watching, remembering all the times Rachel had flaunted Daniel's job in front of me back when they first got together. He was in finance, climbing the ladder, making good money. I had listened to her brag about it as if she had won some prize, as if her happiness depended on proving that she had the better man. But now, sitting next to Michael, I didn't feel the need to brag or compare. I didn't have to. His kindness, his confidence, it spoke louder than words ever could. My dad leaned forward, clearly impressed. A surgeon? That must take a lot of dedication. How long have you two been married? Michael glanced at me and smiled softly. Almost a year now. I felt Rachel's eyes on me, like daggers. Her grip on her wine glass was so tight I half expected it to shatter. She hadn't even known I was married, and that fact alone seemed to sting. So, Melissa, Rachel finally spoke, her voice sweet but edged with something sharp. Why didn't you tell us about your wedding? We're family. I looked at her, meeting her gaze with all the calmness I could muster. Family? I said slowly. When Daniel broke off our engagement for you, where was family then? When everyone told me to be the bigger person, where was family? I didn't think anyone wanted to be part of my life anymore. So I stopped trying to include people who didn't care. The table went quiet again. My mom shifted uncomfortably, my dad looked down at his plate, and Rachel blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't expected me to say it so plainly. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. Michael squeezed my hand under the table again, giving me silent strength. Dinner carried on awkwardly after that. My mom kept trying to fill the silence with small talk, asking about the weather, about the food, about anything to avoid the elephant in the room. But it was useless. The tension was alive, thick enough to choke on. Halfway through the meal, Daniel finally decided to speak up. He leaned back in his chair, forced a laugh, and said, "Well, it looks like Melissa finally landed on her feet." That's good. Took a while, huh? My fork froze midair. My jaw clenched, but before I could respond, Michael spoke. His voice was calm but firm. Melissa didn't just land on her feet. She built a life for herself, one she deserves. Don't make it sound like she was lost without you, because she wasn't. She's stronger than you'll ever know. The room went silent again, only this time, it was different. There was no awkwardness in Michael's words, only truth. My parents looked stunned, Rachel's cheeks flushed, and Daniel's smirk disappeared. For the first time, I saw Rachel shift uncomfortably in her seat, like she was the one under the spotlight now. She picked at her food, avoiding everyone's eyes. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief, like the air I'd been suffocating under for years had finally cleared. Michael wasn't just my husband, he was my shield, the person who reminded me of my worth without me having to fight for it. As the night went on, little comments slipped out, subtle digs from Rachel, defensive remarks from Daniel, but each one only made their discomfort more obvious. My parents tried to hold the dinner together, but it was unraveling, and everyone knew it. At one point, Rachel tried to bring up Daniel's promotion at work, almost as if she was desperate to shift the attention. "Daniel's been doing really well," she said quickly, her smile forced. "He just got promoted to senior manager." Michael smiled politely. "That's great. Congratulations," he said, genuinely. But then he turned to me, his eyes soft, and added, "Though honestly, Melissa's been doing incredible things, too. She's one of the most creative people I know. The way she balances her work and her passions, it inspires me every day." The way he said it, the sincerity in his voice, made Rachel blink and look down. It wasn't about money or titles, it was about respect. And that was something Daniel had never given me, but Michael did without hesitation. By the end of the night, Rachel's smile was completely gone. Daniel barely spoke. My parents, though uncomfortable, couldn't hide how impressed they were by Michael, and by me. It was as if, for the first time, they realized I wasn't the fragile girl who had left 3 years ago. I had come back stronger, and I didn't need their approval anymore. When dessert was served, Rachel finally excused herself to the kitchen, her shoulders tense. A few minutes later, I followed her. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed closure. She was standing by the sink, staring out the window, her hands gripping the counter. When she heard me, she turned, her eyes glossy. "You really think you're better than me now, don't you?" she whispered. I shook my head. "No, Rachel. I don't think I'm better than you. I just think I finally found someone who loves me for me. And that's something you'll never be able to take away." She didn't respond. She just looked at me, her jaw tight, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that looked like regret. But it was too late. I walked back into the dining room, back to Michael, and when I slipped my hand into his, I knew that this time, I wasn't walking away broken. I was walking away whole. And Rachel knew it. When I sat back down at the table, Michael leaned in slightly, his hand resting against mine for a second. That little touch grounded me more than he probably realized. Across from us, Rachel came back from the kitchen with her face carefully arranged, the same polished expression she always wore when she didn't want people to see cracks forming underneath. But I could see them. I always had. Dinner carried on, but the air was heavy. Every clink of silverware against plates sounded louder than it should have. My dad cleared his throat and tried again to shift the mood. "So, Rachel, Daniel, any wedding plans for the two of you? You've been engaged for a while now." Rachel's smile flickered. "We're taking our time," she said, her tone light, though there was an edge to it. "No rush. We want it to be perfect." Daniel didn't even look up. He was scrolling through his phone, barely pretending to care about the conversation. My dad gave him a sharp glance, but he ignored it. I sipped my water quietly, watching. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed this moment would ever come. Back then, I thought Rachel and Daniel were unstoppable, that the betrayal would cement their happiness at my expense. But looking at them now, her restless, him distracted, it didn't look like happiness at all. Rachel, maybe sensing my thoughts, suddenly turned to me. "So, Melissa, Michael must keep you busy with his schedule. I mean, a surgeon, late nights, emergencies. That must be hard on you. Don't you ever feel second place to his career?" I knew what she was doing. She wanted to poke holes, to find some flaw, some weakness in my life that she could latch onto. I smiled calmly. Michael's job is demanding, yes. But he makes time for me. Always. Even if it's just late-night takeout on the couch or walking our dog before dawn. He never makes me feel like I'm second to anything. Michael turned his head and gave me that soft smile, the one that said he was proud of me. Rachel's expression faltered, just a second too long. Daniel chuckled suddenly, without looking up. "Must be nice." Rachel's been on my case about working late all the time. Says I don't make time for her, but hey, someone's gotta pay the bills, right? Rachel's cheeks flushed, her jaw tightening. Daniel, she hissed under her breath. He just shrugged. What? It's true. My mom tried to smooth things over quickly, launching into a story about her garden, but the tension had already shifted in the room. Rachel's attempt to undermine me had backfired, exposing the cracks in her own relationship instead. I glanced at Michael, and I could tell he saw it too. His thumb brushed against mine again under the table, silent reassurance that I didn't need to say anything more. But Rachel wasn't done. Oh no. She never knew when to stop. She leaned forward, her voice just a little too sweet. Well, Melissa, it's nice you've found stability. After all the chaos. I mean, some of us worried you wouldn't recover after what happened. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. Her words cut, not because they were true, but because they reminded me of the lowest point in my life, when I felt abandoned by everyone, even my own family. But before I could respond, Michael spoke again, his tone calm but firm. She didn't just recover. She rebuilt. There's a difference. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line, and for once, she had no comeback. My dad finally spoke up, his voice thoughtful. He's right. Melissa, I don't think we ever told you this properly, but we're proud of how far you've come. I know it wasn't easy. That admission caught me off guard. My chest tightened, and for a second, I didn't know what to say. Growing up, approval from my parents always seemed tilted toward Rachel. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Hearing those words directed at me, it was like a wound I'd carried for years was finally being acknowledged. Rachel shifted uncomfortably at my dad's words, clearly not happy with the attention turning my way. To cover it, she reached for the wine bottle and poured herself another glass, her movements sharper than necessary. Well, good for you, Melissa, she said with forced brightness. I guess some people just take a little longer to figure things out. Michael didn't even flinch at her jab. He simply turned to me and said softly, "You figured it out exactly when you were supposed to." That was it. That was the moment Rachel's composure really cracked. Her glass paused halfway to her lips, her hand trembling just slightly. The rest of dinner dragged on with scattered conversation, but Rachel's energy had shifted completely. She barely looked at Daniel, who seemed oblivious, absorbed in some group chat on his phone. My mom tried to steer things towards safer topics, but the tension kept seeping through, like cracks in a dam. Finally, when plates were cleared and dessert was brought out, my mom's homemade pie, something she always made for family dinners, Rachel excused herself again, this time to the bathroom. As soon as she was gone, Daniel muttered under his breath, not bothering to hide it. Drama queen. My dad's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? Daniel shrugged, leaning back in his chair. What? You know how she is. Always has to be the center of attention. She's probably pouting in the mirror right now. The room went silent. Even my mom froze mid-step, the pie knife in her hand. I stared at Daniel, stunned, not because I didn't believe he'd say something like that, but because he said it so casually, in front of us, in front of Rachel's family. Michael raised his eyebrows but stayed quiet, letting the moment hang in the air. And that's when it hit me, Their relationship wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling, and they couldn't even hide it anymore. Rachel came back moments later, her smile pasted on again, but she didn't notice the tension that lingered from Daniel's comment. She sat down, adjusted her napkin, and tried to steer the conversation back to herself, but something had shifted. My parents looked at her differently now. Michael glanced at me knowingly. And me? I sat there, realizing I no longer felt envy or anger toward her. What I felt instead was something I never expected: pity. Because Rachel had stolen the man I thought was my future, and all it had given her was a hollow shell of a relationship. And I had walked away with the kind of love she would never understand. Rachel's laughter was too loud, too forced when she came back to the table. She talked about her job, her colleagues, her new project at work, all with this exaggerated brightness, as though if she kept speaking, no one else would have a chance to. It was her usual tactic: control the room with her voice so nobody could look too closely at what was really happening. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand gripped her wineglass tighter than before. She hadn't noticed what Daniel had said while she was gone. And part of me wondered how long he'd been making comments like that when she wasn't around to hear. Michael listened politely, nodding at the right moments, but I could tell he wasn't fooled. He leaned slightly toward me and murmured under his breath, just enough for me to hear, "She's performing." I almost laughed because he was right. That's what it felt like: Rachel putting on a play, determined to keep her image intact. "Melissa," my mom suddenly said, cutting through Rachel's monologue, "why don't you tell us about your work these days? I don't think we've heard much about what you've been doing." Rachel froze, her mouth half open. She had been mid-sentence, and my mom had interrupted her, something I had almost never seen happen before. Usually, the spotlight belonged to Rachel, and the rest of us just sat back. I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh. Well, I've been working with the hospital foundation, actually. Fundraising projects, event planning, that kind of thing. We just finished a big campaign that raised enough for new pediatric equipment." My dad smiled warmly. "That's impressive, Melissa. Really impressive." Rachel tried to jump in quickly. "Yes, well, that's nice. Of course, hospital foundations are always looking for donations. Daniel and I were just talking about maybe attending one of those galas." "Right, Daniel?" Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. "What? Oh. Yeah. Sure." The silence that followed was heavy. Rachel's cheeks flushed, and she took another sip of wine to cover her embarrassment. Michael broke the tension with an easy smile. "Melissa did more than attend. She helped organize the gala last year. And she managed to get 3 major sponsors on board. It was a huge success." My mom's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Really? I had no idea." Rachel's fork clattered against her plate a little too loudly. "Well, isn't that something?" The shift was happening. For years, Rachel had painted me as the weak one, the one who got left behind, the one who would never measure up. But now, my parents were looking at me differently, and Rachel could feel it slipping through her fingers. "Speaking of events," Daniel said suddenly, finally putting his phone down, "when's dessert coming?" "I've got an early meeting tomorrow." Rachel shot him a look, but he didn't notice. Mom stood and brought the pie to the table, carefully cutting slices. She handed the first one to Michael. "You're new here, so you get the honor." Michael chuckled and thanked her, taking the plate. The gesture wasn't lost on Rachel, who glanced at me with narrowed eyes. For once, I wasn't the outsider anymore. Michael's presence had shifted the balance in ways I hadn't expected. As we ate, the conversation grew quieter. Daniel poked at his pie distractedly, and Rachel kept glancing at him, clearly irritated. Finally, she snapped. "Daniel, could you put your phone away for once? We're having dinner with my family." He sighed, rolling his eyes. "Relax. I'm answering work messages." "Work messages?" she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "At 9 o'clock at night?" "Yes, Rachel. Some of us have jobs that don't stop when we walk out the door." The room fell silent again. My dad cleared his throat, but Rachel pressed on. "I'm sure it's not urgent. You could show some respect for my family." Daniel's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Respect? You mean like the respect you show me every time you criticize me in front of everyone?" Rachel's face went pale. "I don't do that." "Yes, you do." His tone was flat, unbothered. "Every time we're out, you find some way to put me down. But sure, let's pretend I'm the problem." The tension was suffocating now. My mom's hand trembled slightly as she set her fork down. My dad looked like he wanted to intervene but wasn't sure how. Rachel's eyes darted toward me, then to Michael, as if she wanted to regain control of the conversation, but it was too late. The cracks were showing, and everyone could see. "Daniel," she said tightly, "can we please not do this here?" But he wasn't finished. "Why not? Melissa and her new guy should know what they're getting into. You've always got to have things your way. Nothing's ever enough. And honestly?" He pushed his plate away. "I'm tired of pretending it is." Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because this was the reality she had chosen, the man she had stolen, the life she thought was better than mine. And here it was, unraveling in front of her family, in front of me. Michael reached for my hand under the table, squeezing gently. His calmness was like an anchor, keeping me steady in the storm swirling around us. Finally, my dad spoke, his voice heavy. "Maybe we should all take a breath." Rachel pushed back from the table suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "Excuse me," she muttered, her voice shaking. And without waiting for a response, she hurried out of the room. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the hall. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Typical. My dad's eyes narrowed. "That's my daughter you're talking about." Daniel didn't flinch. "Yeah, well, maybe you should open your eyes to who she really is." The words hung there, bitter and heavy. And all I could think was that Rachel's carefully constructed image had finally begun to crumble, not because of me, but because of the life she had chosen. And the irony was, I didn't even need to lift a finger. After Rachel stormed off, the room felt oddly quiet. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet, though. It was the kind that comes after a small explosion, when everyone knows that what just happened has changed things forever. My mom cleared her throat and attempted to move the conversation forward, but even her voice trembled slightly. Michael leaned closer, his eyes warm, reassuring. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, letting his hand cover mine under the table. "Better than okay," I whispered. Finally, I feel like I can breathe in my own family's space." Mom tried again, her voice gentler this time. "Well, why don't we focus on dessert? Melissa, you take the first slice, dear." I smiled faintly, taking the piece she handed me. Michael followed my lead, and we sat together quietly, letting the tension around us settle for a moment. But of course, it didn't last. Daniel, still glaring at his plate, finally spoke. "I think Melissa's right, actually. Things aren't as perfect as we like to pretend, are they?" The table went completely still. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, and even Michael paused mid-bite to look at him. "I mean," Daniel continued, his voice rising slightly, "you all act like everything's okay, but there's always this expectation, this pressure. Rachel's always on edge, always performing, and it's exhausting." Rachel re-entered the room at that exact moment. She had apparently calmed herself, or tried to, but the tightness in her expression didn't lie. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the truth," Daniel said firmly, finally looking directly at her. "The truth that no one dares say out loud because it's easier to pretend. Melissa's life didn't fall apart, and you didn't get to have a perfect fairy tale either." I could feel Michael's hand tighten around mine again. He didn't say anything, just gave me that steady look that said, "I've got you." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. She opened it again, but no sound came out. She was caught off guard. For once, her words failed her. Finally, my mom spoke, her voice surprisingly firm. "Rachel, maybe we should all just pause for a second." But Rachel wasn't done. Her voice quivered, but she pressed on. "Melissa, you think this is some sort of victory? Walking in here with your perfect husband, showing us how well you've done while I tried to live my life the right way?" I shook my head slowly. "This isn't a victory. Not over you, not over anyone. It's a life I've built for myself. Something I couldn't do when I was chasing validation or waiting for someone else to choose me." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "So, what? You're better than me now?" "No," I said gently. "Better isn't the point. I'm just free. Free from comparing myself to you, from worrying about what everyone thinks. I've finally realized that my worth isn't measured by anyone else." Michael's voice joined mine, calm but strong. "And Melissa's right. You don't get to take credit for someone else's happiness or shame someone into feeling less. That's on you, not her." Rachel's jaw dropped. Her composure cracked again, this time visibly.